up, y'all? I am T. Welcome back to 12 Short Stories. Okay, if you're new here, don't forget to like the video, leave anything in the comments, and make sure you are subscribed for when I post. Let's get right into the first story. One evening, a man and his wife returned home from dinner. When he opened the door, he saw his wife sitting at the computer doing work, which is a normal sight for when he gets off of work, except for the fact that she was entering the house with him. When they went to bed that night, he told her that he inexplicably seen her sitting at the computer earlier. She got very serious and told him that she had seen herself sitting at the computer on the couch earlier too. They both chalked it up to the dinner wine. Creepy. When I was a kid one day, my mom and I were outside. We were taking pictures of old cars to resell in the back of the wooded area of our yard. All of a sudden, my mom hears rustling in the bushes, and she tells me to run. I had flip-flops on, but I didn't hesitate, so I kicked them off and I booked it towards the house. Behind me, I didn't hear my mom, but I heard like a rustling, clanky sound. It sounded like something was jumping on the cars, trying to chase me. While running towards the house, I looked back, still not seeing my mom. I got into the house and I was panicking, but to my surprise, there was my mom, sitting at the table, reading the paper. Fast forward to years later, I have asked my mom about this incident since then. It's been many years now and I am an adult. When I ask her about it, she looks at me funny and tells me she didn't remember anything. The only thing she seems to remember is that we had old cars in our backyard that we used to resell. Could it have been a skinwalker? Is she the skinwalker? When I was about 15, I remember having a dream, and that's all I thought it was. It was all black and I heard talking. I remember hearing my mom say, "It's almost done, it's almost done. You're doing great, it's gone." But I didn't think anything of it. About 3 months later, my earrings got embedded inside of my ears, and I had to go to the hospital to get them cut out. While there, they sprayed freeze spray onto my ears. The spray went too deep into my ear and touched my eardrum. Everything was all black now, and all I could hear was my mom saying the same exact thing from my dream a few months before. No one believes me, but this really happened. I remember her saying, "It's almost done, it's almost done, you're doing great." And then when they finally removed the earring, she said, "It's gone." Nothing like this has ever happened to me since, but it's something I will never forget. I remember being pretty young, like 9 or 10, and I was in a parked car. I remember seeing someone in their teens in the window of a house looking over our parked car. They waved at me from a window, and I felt like I knew them somehow. My parents asked me who I was waving at, and I just said, "Some lady in the window over there." I didn't think much of it until fast forward 10 years. I was at my grandma's new house. I remember walking into her room, which I was never allowed to go into. I went up to the window and I realized this particular window was looking over that same parking lot from all those years ago. I remembered the interaction from years before. Then a girl around 9 or 10 who was parked inside of a car started waving at me. I waved back and I felt like I knew her somehow. I could not explain it and I've never told anyone about it. It still freaks me out to this day. To make sense of it all, I have to chalk it up to being a pure coincidence. So one day I was catching a SkyTrain in one particular city, about 15 minutes from where I get off. While I waited there stood a woman with glazed eyes. She was asking people for money. She came up to me, stopped briefly, and asked me, "Excuse me, can you spare some money? My brother's in the hospital and I would really like to buy him some flowers." Yeah, that's rich, I thought to myself. Drug addicts getting more and more obvious with their lines. But nevertheless, I handed her $5. I gave it to her without even looking her in the face, already convinced of her intentions. Anyway, my train pulls up and I get on. I look through the glass at her walking around asking others for money as the train pulls away. Then I arrive at the next train station 15 minutes later. I walk down, get off the train, and go to the bus stop. There's only one bus in the direction that I'm going, and just my luck, when I got off the train, there the bus was, waiting. So I get on the bus, and we embark down the highway. After about 5 to 10 minutes of traveling, the bus driver pulls over for a routine stop. The doors open, and to my complete astonishment, the woman from the SkyTrain walks onto the bus. She had a dozen roses in her hand. She looks me right in my eyes and walks past me to take her seat. I'm thinking to myself, how did she get here? I took the train before her. I watched her as the train left. I went over a river. I caught the first bus in this particular direction. And not only did she beat me there, she had time to go to the store and buy a dozen roses. To this day, I still have no idea how that happened. Every morning on my way to work, I would always have to walk through a shopping mall. On one of the benches, I always saw an elderly man who appeared to be waiting for someone. He was a fairly normal looking guy. Every morning for 4 years though, I would see this man, but I never actually witnessed him interacting with anyone. He would just sit there on the bench. Then one day, I got a new job and I had to completely relocate to a different part of town. Only a few days into my job, I walk out of the subway. And to my surprise, it's the exact same guy, sitting on a random bench. As usual, not interacting with anyone, just sitting there, seeming like he's waiting for someone or something. So one day we had a pep rally in school, and after it was finished, we all headed back to class. But my friend and I decided to go across the street to Sonic first. Around the school area, there was not heavy traffic. In the school zone, there's usually not heavy traffic, but if you don't pay attention, you could get hit. I remember walking with him, and he dropped something, so he stopped to pick it up. Me, myself, I decided to keep walking across the street. Then suddenly, I saw a red Tahoe heading right for me, and I got hit. I know I got hit. I remember feeling it and blacking out. I remembered everything. I remember gasping for air, waking up, and then falling back unconscious. Then all of a sudden, there was nothing. Then all of a sudden, I was back in the stadium. And again, the exact same words came out of the principal's mouth for us to head back to class. I remember feeling the urge to go to Sonic with my friend, but then I started freaking out. I thought it had been a bad dream, so I just went with him to see what would happen. And once again, as we crossed the street, he dropped something. But this time, I waited for him. And to my horror, the same exact red Tahoe showed up, zooming down the street. I told him, look man, I'm going back to school. I ain't dying again. To this day, I still have nightmares of the other version of me dying in the street. It's messed up. I can't seem to move on from it. I was very close to my granddad, and I was having a pretty difficult time coping after his death. Shortly before he died, I had a cast in a play. We didn't start rehearsals until after he passed. So one day I went to the 3rd floor of the building that the play was being casted in. I had never been in there before. I was the only one there early that day. I looked around and I noticed that the walls were bare, except for there was one cork board. On the cork board, there was a picture pinned to it. I get a little closer and I realize it's a photo of my granddad with the baby. It looked like one of those home photos. It had a footprint on it and everything, and the edges were worn out like it was old. I took the picture down and I later showed it to my mom. My mom told me the baby in the photo was me, but it's a photo she had never seen before, and we had never been in that theater before today. It's so spooky to think about how it got there. However, the photo is still on our fridge till this day. When I was a child, I had a vivid recurring nightmare. It involved an old man with dark hair. He had a dark beard and decaying skin. He would always lead me away from my house and then set it on fire. He would laugh as I sobbed for my family inside. Then he would lead me down to one of those tornado cellars, which I had never really seen or had any experiences with up to the point of having these dreams. I was so traumatized by this imaginary man that I even tried to draw him for my mother. Fast forward to Halloween. A Halloween magazine arrives in the mail, and it's the exact same man on the cover from my dreams. He was coming out of the ground from a tornado cellar. I screamed and I dropped the magazine. My mom thought that I had just seen it somewhere before, but she looked more into the magazine and it hadn't been released any time before we received it in the mail that Halloween. Firstly, I want to start by saying I don't believe in any paranormal nonsense, but I did see something weird once. I think it was late last year. I just happened to look out of my window. It was about 2 a.m. in the morning. I saw a couple guys dressed in black business attire. They were all carrying black briefcases, casually walking down the street. Nothing too weird about that, until 5 more guys followed after them. Then 6, then 7, then 8, then 9, then 10, all in the same black attire, carrying the same black bag. It almost turned into a parade. It kept going for about 10 minutes. They all looked identical. So I pulled out my phone and started filming because it was just weird. I had to have a video for proof. I do live in the greater New York City area, so yeah, it's very possible that they were all just coming from a conference or something. But at 2 a.m., it was all just very strange. While I was living in Denver, I had a friend flying into town to visit me. The Denver National Airport was about 30 minutes away, and her flight was scheduled to land at about 11:15 p.m. At exactly 10:30, I get a text message from her saying, "Just landed, are you here?" Assuming her flight arrived early, I immediately started rushing to the airport while I kept trying to call her, only to have her phone keep going to voicemail. I thought maybe her phone died or something, so I continued to refresh her flight info page, but it kept saying the plane was still in transit. Well, I ended up getting to the airport right before 11:15, and no word from my friend, nor was there new information about the flight, so I circled the airport and just waited. So maybe 15 minutes or so passes, and I get the same exact message she had sent me at around 10:30. I call her, she picks up, and I asked her if she texted me while she was on the plane. She said no, there was no service, and she had her phone turned off the entire time. So when I finally met up with her, I asked her to compare our text message conversations. I had 2 texts from her, one at 10:30 and when she finally arrived, while on her end, she only had the one telling me she just made it. She kept mentioning how her phone was completely off, and she doesn't know how that happened. Either way, this glitch in the matrix made me waste 15 minutes circling the airport. This happened to my family, not me personally. Thanks to time zones, it's also a confusing story to tell. My brother was taking a trip out west. From my dad's perspective, he dropped my brother off at the airport before work. My brother was supposed to have an hour before his flight, followed by a 4-hour flight. After work, about 8 hours later, my dad receives a phone call from my brother. So from my dad's perspective, my brother should have been at his destination for less than 3 hours at least. But to my brother, he took his flight, got to his destination, he was picked up by his friends, went to dinner, spent the night, and then spent the following day sightseeing. He called my dad the next evening. Over 24 hours had passed from my brother's perspective. The confusion ended up in a weird argument, but both stick to their versions of events. They both ended up printing out the flight itinerary to prove that they were right. I have no idea how my dad or my brother lost so much time. This isn't very creepy, but it is a distinct and vivid memory that I have, and I still think about all these years later. I used to have these eerily vivid dreams where I was a vendor in a fish market. I remember getting up early, getting dressed, doing my whole morning routine, getting tea, and heading out to the docks, buying fish, loading them in the cart, going to get ice and hanging them over the ice, going to the market to my stall, setting up and selling fish all day. It was so real. I talked to friends, I smoked nasty cigarettes, I haggled customers, ate lunch, drank tea again, everything, the whole routine. And at the end of the day, I cleaned up, counted my cash, and went home. I would even cook the fish that I hadn't sold that day. After dinner, I would relax. I drew a hot bath and I soaked, smoked more cigs, and went to bed. The next morning, I would always wake up so refreshed, ready to go down to the docks, buy and catch fish. Another weird thing was, in my dream, I was single and a smoker, which I'm not in real life. The whole quote-unquote dream had been in Chinese. I spoke fluent Chinese, effortlessly. It came out like I had spoken for a lifetime. For reference, I'm a big, hairy white dude, somewhat fluent in Spanish, and I know a little bit of Russian, but I've never spoke any Chinese. And I've also never worked in a fish market. It felt so real, I could almost mistake it for being a past life. I remember one night having a dream about the raid that happened in Area 51. I remember people going in and finding actual aliens. I remember exactly what they looked like. They were like a yellowish green color with black eyes and a small nose. Then suddenly I woke up. It was about 5-ish in the morning. Just as soon as my eyes opened, I began to experience a bad case of sleep paralysis. I remember hearing a weird language and seeing 2 yellow-green figures standing on both sides of my bed. One of them touched me. I swear I felt it, and then I blinked. Once I opened my eyes, they were gone. I could move again. I looked over at the clock, and it was around 3 in the morning now. That's a glitch. Definitely a glitch. That's insane. That's weird. The wife who was seen in 2 spots. 2 different spots. Multiple spots. All around the world. Okay. Sorry. I heard that he inexplicably, blah. Boom. And that's how you end the story, bitch.